Okay, we're doing it. It's been Baruch Hashem. It's been a little crazy over here. I've been trying to give this class already for the last hour and a half. It might be a little shorter, it might be a little longer. I don't know, because there's constant people ringing and calling and buzzing as we are in Erev Pesach over here. And also today is the Rebbe's birthday, Yudalf Nissen. We wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be here today as a Chabadnik and a Chabad Shliach and a Chabad emissary, if not for the day today when the Rebbe was born, and with his love and dedication for the Jewish people, sent us all out throughout the world to be there at Chabad Center with so much good and so much love and so much unity and so much Torah and so much mitzvahs are happening. So Baruch Hashem for that. And over here at Chabad, we had special classes today. We had a rally for the children. We had a rally we had special learning, like a yeshiva day for our young boys. Just a lot happening, Baruch Hashem. And we had people coming in to sell their chametz. And we had people coming in to get matzah. So there's, as we say in Yiddish, tutzach. It's going on. It's happening. Okay, what do I do now? Okay, let's say a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol niya bidvaro. Using this cup in honor of Steve, who gave me this cup. So that's wonderful and that's beautiful. Stay right there for a second. Let me answer this door over here. And please forgive me again. It's a bissel hectic. It's Erev Pesach. So that's that. Okay. Passover 101. Did we give tzedakah? We didn't give tzedakah yet. Here we go. We're coming right back. And let's give a bissel of tzedakah. Let's give some charity. So we ask Hashem for a blessing for this class. Here we go. Put some tzedakah in the pushka. Please go ahead. Put some tzedakah in your pushka. And let's get to it. So this is sort of 101. Pesach 101. We have to review a couple of the basics. So first, there are a couple of, there's a lot of customs. There's a lot of customs, a lot of rituals. There's a lot of traditions. Community traditions, family traditions, Chabad, Sephardic, Ashkenazic. So, for example, one of the known ones is that, the Sephardic circles, they have rice, and they have kitnios, they have legumes. Ashkenazim do not. Some of these things were developed with time, different communities, different concerns, and there's no question that you have to honor. The Arizal says, the holy Arizal, the great Kabbalist says that someone who is extra careful with even a mashu, even a minute degree of chametz on Pesach, goes the extra mile, is blessed to be protected from sinning throughout the year, from sinning inadvertently throughout the year. So, Pesach chametz is the most prohibited food that we are prohibited from eating today, or even deriving benefit. If you ask a fellow Jew what is the most prohibited food, typically they will say to you the most prohibited food is chazer, is pig. But actually, chametz on Pesach is more severe, more prohibited than pig. It's more severe in its punishment in the Torah, and it's more severe in its scope of prohibition, because only chametz is not only forbidden to be eaten, but it's forbidden to be in your possession, and it's forbidden to derive any benefit. So, for example, you cannot feed chametz to your pet, because by feeding chametz to your pet, you are deriving benefit from the chametz, even though you yourself are not eating it. You're not allowed to sell chametz on Pesach, and so on. So it is the most severe prohibition, which is why we go the extra mile in getting rid of chametz, whether it's physically getting rid of it, selling it. So this class is not broad enough in its sort of scope to go through all the details, but only that you should know you have to get rid of your chametz. Whether you throw it out, you get rid of it before Pesach, not only before the night of Pesach, but before even Erev Pesach, which is why we have the burning of the chametz. Or you could sell your chametz to a Gentile. For more details, you're welcome to text me or go on to Chabad.org or CoralSpringsChabad.org, and you could learn much more about it in general. CoralSpringsChabad.org, our Passover site, is very comprehensive, and you could become a scholar, you could become a rabbi almost, in order to know and answer many of your questions. So that's in terms of its prohibition. Chametz, Pesach, the most prohibited food today that we have. On the other hand, on the night of Pesach, the two most important, and by the way, I want to, as I say every single year, since this is a review of some of the basics, the prohibition of chametz extends itself also to dishes. So if you've used dishes and pots where you've made kneidlach in, for example, with your matzah balls, that's chametz, 100% chametz. So those pots that you've used for chametz cannot be used for Passover, which is why either we kosher the pots or we have special set of dishes for Pesach. So there's a lot of specific and intricate laws, which I recommend you review so that you could have a wonderful Chag Kasher V'Sameach, kosher and joyous. And perhaps the reason we put it together is that only when the Passover is truly kosher can you really enjoy and be happy, not stressed out, but be happy and appreciate and enjoy what Pesach is all about, which of course is the holiday of freedom, the holiday when we became a people, the holiday when we thank God for an incredible Torah and tradition and and the heritage and contribution that Hashem, that we cherish and honor and continue to give to society and get from the Almighty and so on. So that's all what Pesach is, sort of in a nutshell. And Pesach night, of course, is not just about having brisket, and it's not just about going through the Seder and rushing through it so that we could get to the meal. You could have a meal every day of the year. Pesach is about sitting down. In fact, if I asked you a quiz question, what are the two biblical mitzvahs of the night of Pesach? There's a lot of things we do on Pesach. We dip in the salt water, and we heat mur, and we have charoses, and we have the karpas, and we have the egg, and we have so many things, and we have brisket, and we have gefilte fish perhaps, and so on. But these are, the biblical mitzvah of the night are two basic positive mitzvahs of the night that are uniquely Pesach. There are other maybe mitzvahs that we do, but that are uniquely Passover are two mitzvahs. One is eating matzah. The only thing, from all the stuff we do Passover night, the only biblical positive mitzvah in terms of the food is the matzah that we eat. And therefore, while you could have all different kinds of matzahs today, right? You could have chocolate-covered matzah, and you could have egg matzah, and you could have honey matzah, whatever it might be. Pesach, in order to fulfill the biblical obligation of matzah, you need to have a certain measurement, which is a kazayas, at least. If you want to do it right, you should have up to 4 or 5 kazetim, and which is typically about a little bit more, or give or take, it depends on the thickness, the weight of the matzah. You have to have approximately that in order to fulfill your biblical obligation of the matzah. Of course, you have to understand and appreciate what the matzah represents. It represents our absolute faith in the Hashem when He told us to go out into the desert. The Zohar says matzah is food of faith, matzah is food of healing, and there's so much that you can learn about the meaning of matzah. Of course, matzah represents humility as opposed to chametz, which is rises. You could only put one challah maybe into a package, but you could put multiple matzahs in a box of matzah, because when a person has humility, they have space and room for somebody else, and they both help each other. Whereas challah represents arrogance, though that has risen. So I'm going through this quickly because much of this just sort of a quick review. But the biblical mitzvah of the night is to eat matzah, but matzah means real matzah. The Torah matzah is pure flour and water, no salt, no other ingredients. So while on Pesach night during the meal, you could have whatever matzah you want, but when you're going to have all these flavored matzahs, it is no different than eating gefilte fish, or eating sushi, or eating brisket. That's not the biblical matzah. So you have to make sure that at least you have the biblical matzah undiluted, not with drinking and not with salt, pure matzah, which you have to eat within a certain period of time without interruption, without schmoozing. You make the blessing and you eat that measurement of matzah, approximately a half a shmura matzah. If you're having machine matzah, it's probably a little bit more because it's not as dense, it's not as heavy. So all that is part of the mitzvah of matzah, which you also have to eat while you're leaning and so on. So that's the story with regards to matzah, and that's one of the mitzvahs of the night. What is the other mitzvah of the night? The other mitzvah of the night is to tell the story of Pesach. This is a biblical matzah, and to tell it to your kindalach, and to elaborate, and to internalize, and to not just mention, but to experience. So it is from this that the entire experience of the night of Pesach flows from the Magid and the matzah. Everything else sort of centers around that. The 4 cups of wine was something that the rabbis instituted, which is important. Of course it's important, but it's not one of the biblical mitzvahs. The maror in the days of the Bet HaMikdash was a biblical mitzvah because when the Torah, but today it's not, because the Torah conditions maror, or commands us to eat maror as part of the Paschal lamb. Today, no Bet HaMikdash, it's destroyed. We don't bring a Paschal lamb, so the maror is only a remembrance, a rabbinical obligation as a remembrance of the maror when the Bet HaMikdash stood and when it will stand again with the coming of Mashiach. So these are some of the basics of the Pesach night. Now, because part of the mitzvah of telling of the story of Pesach is to tell it to your children, or at least tell it to somebody else, and if there's nobody else there, even to tell it to yourself. So the focus has become our kindalach, our children. Now, I want to back up for a moment. I know that this has become somewhat common in American homes, that because Pesach, especially now with the clock, they've moved the clock to change a month earlier, a couple of years ago, whenever it was, 4 or 5 years ago. So what happens is that many people start their Seder while it's light outside. Now, it's like, it just doesn't cut it. You know what I mean? Meaning, in order to fulfill your biblical obligation, you have to eat the matzah after dark on the night of Pesach, meaning Tuesday night after dark is at approximately, 8:10, 8:15, something like that. So this is what, this is my plea to those who are listening, is that if you're going to have the Seder early, which you shouldn't, but if for whatever reason you're not listening to me and you have the Seder early, at the very least, make sure that there are these 2 things you do after dark. You have to eat the matzah after dark. If you eat the matzah before dark, you have not fulfilled the biblical obligation of matzah, which is so important. It's important because it's an obligation. It's important because it reminds us of the matzah. It's important that the Jews ate in Egypt and afterwards. It's important because God commanded us to do so. It's important because, as the Zohar says, matzah has the power to strengthen our faith. Matzah, just like when you eat, you have different enzymes and vitamins. Matzah actually strengthens the faith and brings out that koach, that power that you have in your soul. Matzah also has a power of healing, says the Zohar. But these things only happen when you do the mitzvah of matzah. If you're going to eat matzah today, if you're going to eat matzah on a regular Tuesday in the middle of the month of January, you're not going to have these effects. You're not going to fulfill the will of God, and you're not going to have the spiritual benefits of matzah. So too, if you eat matzah on Erev Pesach because you don't want to stay up late, you might as well eat popcorn. Verstehst? So if for whatever reason you're not starting the Seder after dark, which you should, regardless, so towards the end of your Seder, after 8:15, make sure to have the shiur, the necessary measurement to fulfill the obligation of matzah, and make sure that you tell the story. You tell the story, even if you're not going to read the entire Haggadah after dark, although again, you definitely should, at least take a couple of minutes to tell the story to your child. It's important. And if your child goes to bed a little bit late, so be it. So be it. I mean, it's Pesach. It's Pesach on the Yiddish Welt. It's Pesach on this world is when God took us out and made us a people, a nation. How incredible is that? So remember that. It's very, very important. And so that's the story, which tells you how important it is to focus on the children this night. And I want to point that out. I pointed it out in other years, but because of its importance, I'm going to point it out again. Pesach night, we have the 4 sons. Everybody knows about the 4 sons, right? We have Pesach, we have the Chacham, we have the wise one, we have the Rasha, the wicked one, we have the Tam, we have the simple one, we have the She'eni Yodei Lishol, the one who doesn't know how to ask. So many commentaries today. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of Haggadot and online and so on, where you could see an amazing amount of commentaries. But I want to point out one important point. There's no other mitzvah, to the best of my knowledge, where God says, okay, I'm giving you a mitzvah, and then I want you to address this mitzvah to 4 different types of children. God says you should put on film. God says you eat kosher. God says you should keep Shabbat. God says you should love your fellow as yourself. And it doesn't then say, okay, and there's a chacham of how you address this mitzvah to the chacham, to the wise son, how you address this mitzvah to the wicked son. It doesn't happen. And the reason is because Pesach night, the focus are the children. Why? Because that's when we became a nation and we became a people. And in order for us to continue to become to be a people, you have to pass it on to our kindlach, to the next generation. Otherwise, it doesn't continue. If you look at a community, you look at a synagogue, you look at a shul, and you walk inside and you don't see children there, sadly, historically, reality is that the synagogue will not endure. It's just not going to endure. But if you walk into a shul, Baruch Hashem, thank God, we walk into the shul over here on the Shabbat, and there's Bli Ayin Hara, who knows how many children all over the place, running around, playing. We have here a playground that's been dedicated in memory of Meadow Pollack. All over the synagogue, and you have programs, and you have children. Baruch Hashem, I don't want to say a number, so no Ein Hara, there's so many children all over the place. That's a sign that it's going to continue. That's what it's all about. And God understood this, and God recognized this. So that is why the Torah tells us about the 4 children. You know why? Because in order for us to be successful in raising the next generation, every parent has to understand who their children are. In other words, it's not a one-size-fits-all. We know that. You have to address and inspire and pass on and set the foundation, ignite the neshama, the soul of the chacham, and then you have the wise one. Then you have a child who's a rebellious one who challenges. You have a child who's more ignorant, doesn't like to learn, doesn't like to study, doesn't have the brain to study. You as a parent must find a way to reach and to uplift, to penetrate, to change, to shape, to mold each one of their children of your children in their individual way. Chanoch, as Shlomo says, Chanoch lanar al pi darko. Only then can you celebrate Passover. Only then can you celebrate your exodus individually, if you know that you're able to inspire and pass it on to the children. I have people who tell me that they do all these little skits with their kids so that they could personalize it to the children. That's wonderful. Of course, in addition to what our sages have established of what needs to be done to celebrate Pesach and what it says in the Torah. But if you are innovative and you come up with new ideas to reach your different children, to have them engaged, that's wonderful. All for it. So this is some of the stuff. Of course, Pesach, I'll just sort of conclude with a story. On Pesach, families have different hidurim, different extra stringencies. Some of them, we don't even know why. But it's become a tradition in the family, and the holy commentaries tell us one should not mock or be sort of indifferent or be dismissive of family traditions. So, I grew up, and this has a reason. This is based on the Shulchan Aruch of the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad movement, wrote a Shulchan Aruch called Shulchan Aruch Harav, or Shulchan Aruch Admor Hazaken. And the Alter Rebbe there writes about a stringency that is kept very much so in Chabad and even in other circles, and that is that we do not have what's called gebroks, or eat any matzah with any one of the halachic liquids. There are certain liquids that qualify as liquids as opposed to fruit juice by Jewish law. So we are very careful that matzah does not come in contact with any moisture. So we do not have matzah balls on Pesach. Other than the last day, there's a certain leniency on that day, but we don't have. And I grew up at home where my father made sure that there was no crumbs on the table. We didn't dip the matzah into any of the dishes that had moisture, and he was very careful, very strict about that. And I try to pass that on to my children. But at the same time, one always has to, take things within balance. And on that note, I share here a known story of the previous Rebbe. The previous Rebbe was the Rebbe of Chabad, the sixth Rebbe of Chabad. And like all of Chabad, he was very stringent and careful with what's called matzah shruya, soaked matzah, to make sure that there's no contact between matzah and any moisture. And once there was someone at his table, and this fellow at his table apparently was not aware. He was invited to the table. He was less aware of some of the stringencies of the Chabad world. And he took his matzah, this is in Russia, and he dipped it in to the borscht. I'm assuming it was in Russia. Maybe it was already here when they was in the United States. And everybody around was like a guest, matzah at the previous Rebbe's table inside the borscht. And the previous Rebbe kept his eyes down and didn't respond. And later, or at some point, they asked the previous Rebbe why we know how careful you are and how you always guide us and to make sure not to have matzah with any moisture. Why didn't you say anything or direct? So the Friedrich Rebbe responded in the following. For those who know Yiddish, you'll appreciate it. I'll say it first in Yiddish. He said, "Beser aroita matzah v'aroita ponim." Okay, please translate if you know Yiddish, or give us a thumbs up for Yiddish. So he said, better a red matzah than a red face. When you embarrass somebody publicly, their face turns red. And he says, yes, I am very meticulous about matzah shruya, not to have dipped matzah, but embarrassing someone else in public is a lot worse. So beser aroita matzah, sometimes you need to understand that. That's not to mean that it always... You get the story. Okay, I'm not going to further elaborate. It reminds me of a story that I heard from Rabbi Jacobson, who repeats the story from time to time, about a fellow who comes home from the synagogue on a Friday night, on a regular Friday night, and there's guests at the table, and he makes kiddush, and as he's making kiddush, he notices that his wife did not cover the challah properly. There's two challahs on the table, reminding us of the double portion that we received, the man in the desert, and you're supposed to cover the challah. And he noticed that the challah wasn't covered. And after Kiddush, he sort of said some harsh words to his wife in front of the guests. And she was embarrassed. Rabbi Jacobson points out, he says, how distorted, how we say tone deaf is this individual. Why do we cover the challah when we make Kiddush? Because there's a whole discussion, what should come first when you make the bracha. Usually you make the bracha on the bread first. Now we're making the bracha on the wine first. So as not to embarrass symbolically the challah, we cover the challah while we make Kiddush. So he says over here, he's embarrassing his wife, a human being. It's not just symbolic. You're actually embarrassing your wife who worked hard and prepared for the guest. You're embarrassing your wife as to protect and not to embarrass the challah. So sometimes that can happen. Sometimes we go meshuggah and we go wacky and we just are so that could happen. And of course, we need to pay attention to these things. Well, we have to be meticulous in all these customs and laws, but never forget of how things, within the context and how to be a mensch and how to properly execute these things and to know wenn ja und wenn nicht. And so that's that. That's part of my thoughts for the day. You're welcome. If you have any questions, and sorry for that ringing in the background. If you have any questions on Pesach, we're getting calls all the time. You could text, you could reach out. If you know anybody who needs help, if you know anybody who doesn't have where to go to for Seder, if you know anybody who doesn't have matzah for Pesach, please reach out. We will be glad. We'll be glad to be there and to help and so on. So that's that. That's my sort of short thought for the day. I want to maybe end off with one more thought, and I was thinking about this. It's a little bit of a personal thought, so that's why I said let me share it. Let me share it because talking about the best aroita ponim, the aroita matzah aroita ponim, better to have a red face, meaning to make sure to always be sensitive and loving and caring for your fellow. So I was thinking about all the missiles that are flying now in Israel, and people are have to constantly run into the shelters. And one of the things that struck me is that, just a short, maybe 5 years ago, yeah, probably before October 7th, maybe a little bit before that, there was this sentiment in Israel when Hamas was shooting rockets in the south. So those who lived in Tel Aviv or maybe even in Jerusalem felt, well, it's not us. It's only on those fanatics who are living over there. The settlers. It's the settlers' fault. We're in Tel Aviv. We're safe and we're good. Or if you're living in Yerushalayim, we're holy and so on. God is protecting us, and it's not about us. It's not our problem. Who asked them to live there? Who asked them? But when these bombs are flying, when these missiles are flying, it affects everybody. Whether you're right wing or left wing, whether you're more religious, less religious, whether you're Sephardi, Ashkenazi, Chabadnik, another, a Misnagid, everybody is in this together. You look at the miklatim, you could see people holding their pets and you could see people running around with all their kids, and they're all in this together. An incredible reminder, almost like a forced reminder of who we are in our unity and that the enemies don't care. And the point of that is that we should take that to heart. And when we take that to heart and we recognize that essentially we're all one, that power of unity, as we're told in the Torah and in the Talmud and in so many holy books, that once we are truly united in a real way, not in a superficial way, then nobody could overpower us. Nobody could harm us. So let's take this experience, which we want to go away and we don't wish it, especially that there's injured and those who have been killed, although miraculously the numbers are Baruch Hashem, may it continue so, and even less so, that not even one drop of blood should fall. The numbers are incredible. But the unity that we see coming out of all of this is also incredible. And in that zchut and that merit, we will definitely be victorious, no matter what we're hearing or reading out there, because there's nothing more powerful than the power of unity. And these missiles are a sort of a forced reminder, bringing us together. But then we're supposed to internalize it and allow it to express itself in how we treat someone else who maybe thinks differently, has a custom that's different than us, and so on. That's that power of achdut. And that is what Pesach is about. We all went out together. As the Torah stresses, b'narechem, b'skenechem, b'tapchem, neshechem, everybody went out of Egypt. So that's the story. That's our message for today. It's hectic. Baruch Hashem, it's hectic. Wonderful Yom Tov. Remember, in all this stress, don't forget about the Kinderlach. Make sure they are the stars of the show over here. And they are our future, and it is with them. Just like when they went out of Egypt, they said, look at our Kinderlach that we raised in Mitzrayim. Look at our children that we raised in the USA. We raised them as proud Jews, as happy Jews, as believing Jews, as practicing Jews. That's our true achievement, our true wealth. So let us all enter into Pesach with this spirit, with this commitment. Everybody have a wonderful, kosher, and happy Pesach. There we go. We're still here. What happened over here? Okay, I guess he wants me to give you another blessing. You should have an amazing Pesach, an extraordinary Pesach. Okay, sei gesund.